Capital gains tax is an important tax to consider when you're planning your investments, which ultimately lead to the achievement of your financial goals. To talk about the various types of tax involved and some of the taxes that could come your way even if you don't sell mutual fund units, I have with me PV Subramaniam, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Subramani.com. Thank you so much, PV, for taking the time. It's important for people to be aware of the various taxes involved in their investment. So first, let's sort of set the context. Capital gains tax on various types of these asset classes is different here in India. Could you spell it out for us?
Okay, the income tax definition is capital gain arising out of a transfer of a capital asset is subject to taxation. So whether it could be long-term or short-term. So first of all, there has to be a capital asset. It's very clear what is the capital asset. Does not include personal assets like your maybe your car or your clothes and things like that. It has to be an asset which is like equity, your units of a mutual fund, land, building, gold. That would be a capital asset. When that is transferred, you make a gain. You bought it for X rupees, you sell it for X plus, and on the gain that you make, you're subject to income tax, which is called capital gains tax.
Okay, so that is capital gains, but when you talk about equity, for a long time here in India, there was no tax, but then you had the reintroduction of, or rather, there was no long-term capital gains tax, and then you had the reintroduction of long-term capital gains tax. There is also long-term capital gains tax on fixed income mutual fund schemes, as well as on real estate and gold. How are each of these asset classes taxed?
Well, we were nicely fooled into believing that because there is STP, there will be no capital gains tax. So the government introduced STP, and to make it easier to introduce STP, they removed capital gains tax. This was under the previous UPA regime. And then when Modi came to power recently, maybe 2-3 years ago, capital gains tax was reintroduced at 10%. So everything is taxed in India, whether it is capital bonds, whether zero coupon bonds or any of those bonds, they're taxed. Mutual funds are taxed, debt mutual funds, equity mutual funds, land, real estate, and gold. Everything is subject to some kind of taxation. So equity and bonds are considered to be long term if it is held for more than 1 year. Land is supposed to be long term if it is held for more than 2 years, and gold is supposed to be long term if it is held for more than 3 years. So if you hold it for a period less than 1, 2, or 3, depending on the asset, you will pay short term capital gains tax. If you hold it for a longer period, 1 year for equity, 2 years for land, and 3 years for gold, you will pay long term capital gains tax.
Why is it, and PV, is it only here in India, among the major markets, that there is such a disparate treatment of these assets, and the definition of long-term gains is different among different asset classes?
I think so, because abroad also the taxation is definitely, but the taxation rates are not very different, but they also have taxation, but most of them would have indexation. Funnily, in India, equity does not get indexation. Equity grows the fastest and equity grows the highest. And there, where you need indexation, there is no indexation for equity, but there is indexation available for real estate. Indexation is available for debt mutual funds, but it is not available for gold, right? So, yeah, there is a lot of differentiation, and it can easily be standardized and made very simple.
Okay, a couple of points here. For those that are not familiar with the concept of indexation, why is it such a big advantage to have indexation in an appreciating capital asset?
And understand one thing, in a country where inflation is 8-9%, every year if your money grows by 9%, you have just not made money. Your 100 becomes 109, but your 109 buys exactly the same thing which 100 rupees bought 1 year back. So you have to be at least be compensated for that. If you bought an asset for 1 lakh in 2002 and you're selling it for 4 lakhs now, it is not 4 lakh minus 1 lakh which can be taxed. That 1 lakh of 2022 is very different from 1 lakh of 2002. That has to be adjusted for inflation. Let's say inflation adjusted, that is 2.5 lakhs. So you should pay capital gains or tax on 4 lakhs minus 2.5. So you should pay capital gains on 1.5 lakhs, right? You're just adjusting the value of rupee to today's rupee. I mean, 2002, the value of rupee was very different from 2022. So you're just adjusting for inflation.
Okay. Where is this inflation rate accessible to you for the purposes of calculation of indexation on these long-term assets?
The government releases the number on a regular basis. So it was, I think, started in 1981 or something, and that was 100. So every year it keeps changing. So now it could be say 233 or 333. So that means your cost, your 1 rupee of 1981 is worth 3 rupees of today. That's all. It just means inflation has taken your prices 3 times higher today.
To elucidate this point further, assuming that you have a CAGR over a period of say 5 years in a particular asset that you have indexation on of about say 8%, and if the inflation over that period is 6%, then you pay a tax, a long-term capital gains on the differential of those two, which is 2 percentage points. Right.
Perfect. Perfect.
Right. So let's get into the other aspect of it, right? Which is why standardization? Why would standardization be such a big advantage? And I mean, I guess I'm going to have to ask you to hazard a guess as to why this hasn't happened yet.
I think just no non-application of mine. Some bureaucrat sitting somewhere has made these rules. So without any great application of mine, nobody has seen it in totality and said we can do this. I don't think it really matters. I don't think capital gains is a very big source of money for the government. So if they standardize everything and said 3 years for every asset is short term, anything about 3 is long term, that would not hurt the revenue for sure. It is, I don't think very much of thought process has gone into it. It is just over a period of time, each one has evolved. And once upon a time, it was 3 years for real estate also. Then they said, oh, real estate is not doing well. Let us give them an incentive, and they made it 2 years. There's nobody lobbying for gold. So gold did not get reduced from 3 years to 2 years. Nobody lobbying enough for mutual funds. So it is, there is no indexation available on equity. Remember, it is only 1 or 2 years back that this has been introduced. So people are not hurt so much. After a few years, it will be really very hurtful because there is no indexation. But it will take time, so people will start protesting after some time.
We'll have to wait and watch as to what happens there. But there are a few other cases, PV, when you don't sell a mutual fund unit also, you could have tax incidents. What are some of these instances?
See, this is very foolish if you ask me, because first when you ask me, I defined capital gain. There is a transfer of assets, right? So if I sell my house, there is a transfer. I am selling my house and the buyer is buying. So there is a transfer, so there has to be capital gains. That is easy to understand. Now, suppose my father held shares worth, units worth 30 lakhs with my mother as a second holder and me as a nominee. After my father's death, I wish to transfer it, and to avoid future complications, what I do is I create two folios with my mother as the first holder, with me as a second holder for 15 lakhs, and another folio with my mother as a first holder, my sister as a second holder for another 15 lakhs. So that tomorrow there is no dispute as to the split is half-half, it is done, right? So my mother has not really done anything except that she has converted her single holding, because she was single holding on my father's death, to a joint holding with me and another joint holding with my sister. Unfortunately, this will be considered as a sale, and therefore she will be subject to income tax. Now, there are other options, which are available. I could be under the direct mutual fund, or I could be under the regular mutual fund. Suppose I'm under a regular mutual fund and I wish to eliminate the agent in between and shift to direct. So I'm not doing anything. I'm just shifting a mode of holding from regular to direct, and I will still pay income tax. So these are small administrative changes where just by change of option, I'm still paying tax. But go back to the definition. Is there a transfer of capital asset? No. But by a fiction of law, I will get a new folio number. I get a new method of holding. I would be holding either or survivor instead of single. I'll be holding in direct instead of regular. So all these changes will be captured by your AIS, which is there in your income tax portal. And therefore, you will be subject to, in fact, you are being subject to capital gains tax because it looks like a sale and redemption, right? It means I removed my money under the regular plan and reinvested under the direct plan. That is what technically it is. So the money may not have come in and gone out. So all these small changes are all subject to taxation, and that is a huge one because I'm paying 10% for doing nothing. If I've sold and realized the money, asking me to pay tax is perhaps justified. But if I've done nothing, I've just changed the mode of holding from holding with my wife to holding with my wife and daughter, or some small changes like this, all these things attract capital gains tax. And that I think is unfair.
So it definitely does need to be looked at very closely. The other aspect that I wanted to speak to you about, PV, is especially with regard to equity investments. But I guess you can extend that to even other asset classes, not real estate, of course, because you don't buy and sell real estate as often as you do equity. Is there a case to be made to have a periodic booking of profits and losses?
Yes, if your holding is not very big. For somebody holding, say, 20 lakhs, and say annual appreciation has been 5%. So the 20 lakhs has become 21 lakhs. If he sells off the units for 21 lakhs and books a profit of 1 lakh, that whole thing will be tax free. I'm assuming this 20 lakhs is equity because if it is debt, then it is dealt with differently. So yes, it makes sense because 1 lakh is tax free and on the balance you will pay 10% tax. So at least book 1 lakh of profit. Whether your portfolio is 1 crore or 20 lakhs or whatever, at least keep booking your 1 lakh of profits every year because that at least is tax free. Of course, if your portfolio is 50 crores and 60 crores, then it doesn't really matter because what you're trying to save is almost peanuts. Then it may not make any sense and you'll anyway have 1 lakh of capital gain. But yes, it makes sense. If you have a small portfolio and 1 lakh is a big amount, then yes, it makes sense. But Alex, one important thing is I don't think you should buy and sell units of mutual funds or direct equity just because there is profit or just because there is loss, right? You should be buying or selling equities on the basis of performance. You should be buying and selling mutual fund units on the basis of performance. Just doing it for tax does not make any sense. But yes, if you're doing it for tax and you're anyway going to hold it for a long period of time, even selling and buying back the same units, right? You have sold from XYZ equity fund and you buy back the same XYZ equity fund. Yes, then you will incur some SPT and all that, but then you are at least selling worth 20 lakhs or selling worth 21 lakhs and buying worth 21 lakhs. And that 1 lakh is the profit which you have already booked. So yes, it makes sense.
The case of an investor who's got a portfolio of stocks, and if you have a situation where you have conviction of these stocks, but there is a major decline in any one of them, or if there is a decline in a basket of them, then is there a case to be made to book losses and reinvest? Because,
Absolutely.
yeah, and could you explain why?
See, this is what is called tax harvesting. So it makes sense. Suppose I bought some shares worth 5 lakhs of rupees and that is worth 3.5 lakhs today. It makes sense for me to sell it for 3.5 lakhs and buy it back maybe after a day or two, or maybe definitely not on the same day because otherwise it will be treated as the second leg of the transaction will be treated as a speculative transaction. So either you sell it in your own account and buy it in your own account after a day or two, you are taking a risk that the price may fluctuate, or you sell it in your account and buy it in your wife's account on the same day, right? So that way the money remains within the home and the tax of 1.5 lakhs is got booked in your name. And then if you have a profit of 1.5 lakhs in some other share, you suppose you bought one share for 5, that has become 3.5, and another share which you bought for 6 has become for 5 has become 6.5. You sell both. You book a profit of 1.5 lakhs, you book a loss of 1.5 lakhs, and you don't pay any tax because one will be set off against the other. I'm assuming both are short term, so this can happen. So you will set it off. Even if your profits are 2.5 lakhs and your losses are 1.5 lakhs, it's still worth it because 2.5 minus 1.5 will be just 1 and 1 lakh is tax free. So yes, tax harvesting is worthwhile. But Alex, remember, tax harvesting is not worth the trouble because the difference between long term and short term is only 5%. And if you have a STP and you have cost of transaction, and if you don't know how to do it, so you anyway you will have to go through a broker, you will pay the brokerage, you will pay all those charges. If the differential should be really worthwhile, and I don't think for 5%, if in 5%, 2.5% is wiped out by all those costs, then it may not be worthwhile.
That's a fair point. But the concept is definitely something that you need to consider. And
Absolutely.
I guess you need to
Absolutely.
weigh the pros and cons, look at the numbers involved, and then take a call. But this provision is available under the tax laws. But
Yes.
I think, we've covered quite a bit of this, and certainly some aspects that exist, PV, have to be looked at by the administration. And I'm hoping that that does get addressed, if not in this budget, then in the near term at least. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.